Welcome to Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. Listen, giving thanks to God in all circumstances. I want to talk today about the very first Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Truly thankful people are those who are thankful to God for all they have, where they live, where they're at, for most people anyways. Thankful people are content with how God has dealt with them. Now, this is just as true of the pilgrims who founded America, the United States of America, as it is for those who cherish God and country here in the 21st century. Today I want to shed greater clarity as to the true history of what we have come to know as Thanksgiving. Big holiday, right? And now we're going to do this part one, and we'll have part two, which will follow up here on Thanksgiving Day. And on Thursday, I'll go ahead and as well share with you two of the only eyewitness accounts of the actual Thanksgiving celebration, along with some key biblical scriptures regarding what God tells us about the importance of being thankful. Welcome to Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first, and the reasons come last, but where we're always and constantly learning, because listen, when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. Today's truth is that we are called to give thanks to God in all circumstances. That's all circumstances, just as the first pilgrims gave thanks to God in all their circumstances, is just as we as Christians of the 21st century are to do the same. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says that we are to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. Remember, truly thankful people are those who are thankful to God for all they have, where they live, and again, why they are here on this earth, right? Have their life. Thankful people are content with how God has dealt with them, as difficult as that may be, different periods of our life. Today is part one of a two-part special Thanksgiving edition of Reason for Truth. Part two will air this Thursday, and you won't want to miss that. So make sure that you not only subscribe to Reason for Truth, but also pop that little alert bell at the bottom of your screen, because listen, you don't want to. You know what's going to happen. You're going to eat lots of turkey, be filled with that tryptophan, which what's the stuff that's in turkey that makes you tired, right? Fall asleep. And the next episode comes out, you know what's going to happen, right? You're going to fall asleep on the couch. You're going to miss the episode. You don't want to do that. So make sure you subscribe and smash, boom, that little alert bell on the bottom. Now, according to Old Farmer's Almanac, founded back in 1792, this is the real deal, the original, in an article entitled Weather on the First Thanksgiving, like the weather outside, right? Just before the first Thanksgiving celebration, the pilgrims faced a much-delayed stormy sea voyage, is what they wrote, before they landed on December 18th, 1620. This was the first day of winter, and over the next few winter months, 45 of the first 102 settlers died. Listen, a few short months later, they rolled right into a very rough spring. It didn't get much better very quickly for the pilgrims. It didn't stop them, really, in all their circumstances. Even though those circumstances were changing, God's provision sustained them. And as a result, autumn brought a bountiful harvest that led to what we had come to know as the first Thanksgiving. We're called today, just as the first pilgrims were called in 1620, to give thanks to God in all circumstances. Again, in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, God's word tells us this. Again, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. Today, I want to share with you 5 important points about the history of the first Thanksgiving that give better context and direction as to how you and I can give thanks to God and live daily, this life towards God with great thanks in all circumstances. But again, today we're going to cover the first 3, and then we'll cover actually 2 more, and then some scriptures in part 2, which again, you don't want to miss. So without further ado, let's get started. First, as I stated up front, the tradition of the Pilgrims' first Thanksgiving is steeped in quite a bit of myth and legend. There's a lot of misinformation, man, when you read through the internet, and so you got to really be careful of your sources, right? Thanksgiving started off really truly as a one-off event for the pilgrims. They didn't sit down and go, hey, let's set a holiday called Thanksgiving. It was a one-off event, but few people realize that they just didn't celebrate Thanksgiving the next year or the year after that, right? Later in history, though, the founders of our country set up this commemoration or holiday called Forefathers Day. Forefathers Day usually occurred in December 21st or the 22nd. George Washington actually first issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation designated for the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving. That's what he called it. to be held when? On Thursday, the 26th day of November, 1789, marking the first national celebration of a holiday. It's important to note that school children today aren't really been taught this stuff in most cases in our modern culture. It was George Washington who is responsible, by the way, for the Thanksgiving holiday remembrance, okay? At least for launching it. So while subsequent presidents failed to maintain this tradition, it was Washington who originally made the proclamation, and really it was the guiding light for Abraham Lincoln, who in 1863, by God's grace, issued this Thanksgiving proclamation. In fact, Lincoln issued his proclamation on the same day that George Washington did his. That was on the 3rd day of October. This is designated the same day, Thursday, November 26th now, as Washington did. As a result, this set Thanksgiving to be observed and celebrated the last Thursday of each November. It was our first president, George Washington, not the Pilgrims, and really not technically Abraham Lincoln, who led the original charge to make this Day of Thanks a truly national event. Listen, as time progressed, in 1827 now, this is interesting, Mrs. Sarah Joseph Hale from Philadelphia, right, city of brotherly love, she was a writer, an editor, and author of the famous nursery rhyme, What Else? Mary Had a Little Lamb. She began lobbying several presidents for the creation of Thanksgiving as a national holiday, but her lobbying, for the most part, was unsuccessful until 1863, when none other than Abraham Lincoln, thank God, came into the picture. Finally, this great president made it a national holiday, cemented it, and that's the true account of how the American Thanksgiving holiday came to be. Now, over time, the Thanksgiving holiday got some updates, dip and tucks here, and that's going to be the second point. Number 2, today, the Thanksgiving holiday celebration is held on the 4th Thursday of November. Now, this was set up by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1939 and approved by Congress in 1941, who changed it from Abraham Lincoln's designation as the last Thursday in November to the 4th Thursday of the month. The problem with the holiday falling on the last Thursday was that it would occasionally end up being the 5th Thursday, which was too close to the Christmas holiday, which I think meant that, listen, it got too close to Christmas shopping and business season, aka commercialism. I'll just leave it at that. So when did Thanksgiving actually start? Well, this leads us to our next point, number 3. The Pilgrims' first Thanksgiving began at some unknown date between September 21st and November 9th. The most likely time was probably in early October. Some suspect that the Thanksgiving holiday was set to correlate with the anchoring of the Mayflower at Cape Cod, which occurred on November 21st, 1620. According to the Julian calendar, which the Pilgrims used, by our modern Gregorian calendar, the date was November 11th. The Gregorian calendar was the first introduced, by the way, by Pope Gregory the 13th, which is how the calendar got its name, by the way, if you were wondering. The Gregorian calendar was implemented by several countries around the world because of the Julian calendar assumed that a full year is 365.25 days, where it's actually 11 minutes less, right? And they just kind of add a little bit on there. I know that what you're wondering, hey, I wanted to know that, Steve. Just give you a little better context, that's all. All right, let's move on to the fourth point, which are that these two temporary accounts of the 1621 Thanksgiving event itself. But we're not going to get to that fourth point. We're going to pick that up next week. We're going to actually look at some of the eyewitness accounts. There's 2 of them as to the contemporary accounts. They were there, and they wrote about the 1621 original Thanksgiving. So you don't want to miss that. The best way not to miss that, by the way, is subscribe. Hit the alert button, all right? So, listen, in closing, let's try to remember the singular most important point, which is that we are to be content with what the Lord has given us. Be content in all circumstances. Good place for us to start is 1 Thessalonians 5:18, which tells us, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. Remember, the Pilgrims faced death, limited food, famine, all this before this wonderful autumn feast, right? With peace and plentiful, this moment called Thanksgiving. So today in America, we're facing a lot of internal strife, division, violence, and distortion of the truth. Despite this mess, listen, you can be assured of one thing, and that's an important one thing. It's God's in control. Knowing this, let's stop, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you and for me. And listen, that's your Thanksgiving reason for truth. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Promise I'll get back to you within a very reasonable amount of time. If you're listening on podcasts, please give us 5 stars in iTunes and subscribe. But now, listen, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe and bam, pop that alert bell at the very bottom of your screen, because remember, if you don't do that, you know what's going to happen. You could eat up all that turkey. You lay on the couch. You can be filled up with tryptophan. If you don't know what that is, just Google it. That's what we do with everything today, right? That tryptophan is a substance, remember, in turkey that makes you sleepy. So as a result, you're going to pop on that couch, fall asleep. You're going to miss that episode. You don't want to do that. So what you want to do is go down, subscribe, and bam, hit that alert button. Listen, it's year end. On a serious note, we appreciate y'all tuning in, and I hope you'll tune in for the next right here on Thanksgiving for part 2. But it's year end, and we're running short on some resources needed to help us finish strong for 2020 and really launch about 3 new programs for 2021. One of those actually is called equippedacademy.com. You want to check that out. That's going to launch in January here, 2021. And we can't do the mission, though, without you, without your prayerful support and without your financial support. Listen, if you consider a one-time gift, perhaps, or becoming a monthly supporter, we'd really appreciate that. A lot of people come on, they start at $40 a month. That's great. Some people do $100 a month. That's wonderful. We appreciate any consideration. Your prayerful support. We appreciate that very much. We need that. That's very powerful. If you can do that by going to reasonfortruth.org, reasonfortruth.bible, you find a little button on the top right, and you can just hit the donate button, right? I'll see you guys for part 2, this special Thanksgiving edition of Reason for Truth. Listen with a grateful and Thanksgiving heart. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.